Chapter 49 on praying in one's own words. Everything said so far was said of prayer or psalmody in already set words, which, although said with attention and feeling, are not one's own. Should one for always restrict oneself to these? Prayer itself will answer this question for him who prays. Begin praying rightly with prayers learnt by heart, and from the start, prayer will begin to graft itself to the soul, and the more firmly it becomes grafted, the more it urges a man also to send forth such personal prayer as is fashioned in his heart according to his needs. So with his regular prayers, he will also address such prayers to God. Thus, one's own prayer has its recognized place and part in the work of prayer. I have already mentioned in the preceding chapter that when during recital of prayer the words of some prayer you utter especially touch your soul and fill it, you must not leave them without attention. You must pause and pray from yourself about the thing that is filling your soul. So do this. The same happens when you read the Word of God or the profitable writings of the Holy Fathers, or when you reflect on divine things, on the greatness and perfection of God, His wonderful works of creation, His omnipotence and providence, and the most wonderful work of dispensation through His incarnation to save us. It is also produced by specially striking and impressive occurrences of daily life. In other words, something particularly strikes the soul, captures its attention, and urges it to ascend in prayer to God on high. In all such cases, do not neglect to give attention to the impulse born in you, but respond to its urge and interrupt for a while whatever you happen to be doing. These sudden impulses mean that prayer has begun to inhabit your heart and to fill it. For these impulses do not come as soon as you have undertaken training in prayer, but only after a certain time, more or less long. These inner impulses are a proof of progress in the work of prayer, and the more frequent they are, the more the spirit of prayer fills the heart in which they are born. It should all end in praying always in one's own words alone, though in actual fact it does not happen so, but one's own prayer always enters into the set prayers, for they are of the same nature and the same degree of virtue, and if they are replaced it is by standing in the presence of God in wordless contemplation. You must know, moreover, that sometimes in such cases it is the impulse alone for some prayer that is born, but at other times prayer itself accompanies the impulse, forming itself in the heart, without effort on the part of the man who prays. In the first instance, you must yourself fashion a suitable prayer, but in the second, you must only listen and not interfere with the prayer pouring from the heart. Moreover, I remind you, do not be tempted by the desire to formulate your own prayers without such inner impulse and necessity. You can compose a very clever speech to God, but it will not be prayer. It will be merely a combination of words and thoughts, but without the spirit of prayer. Do not do this. You will not avoid vanity and a high opinion of yourself, and these products stifle and stamp out real prayer. As regards prayer that forms itself in the heart, when the urge arises in it to pray about something which affects you personally and which you specially need, very often it is actually your own creation from the elements of prayer, collected in the heart from learning and assimilating existing prayers, but sometimes it is produced by the action of divine grace. In such cases, it is the seed and the germ of the spiritual prayer I mentioned in chapter 47. When you begin to be granted this, it will mean that you are approaching the boundaries of the perfection accessible to you. Give thanks then to God and walk on the path of life with still greater fear and trembling. The more precious the treasure, the more covetous the eyes of the enemies.